freely cast your vote is foundational for our system of government, but it takes each and every one of us doing our part to help ensure our democracy can thrive. That's why I'm urging all Californians to know their rights and make a plan to vote. There are three key things I want to share about the September 14th recall election. For one, today is the day that county elections officials are required to begin mailing every registered voter a vote-by-mail ballot. Number two, all Californian voters are protected under the California Voter Bill of Rights. And three, every voter should make a plan to cast their ballot by or on September 14th so your voice is heard. Just like the 2020 general election, in the upcoming recall, every voter will have the option of voting by mail. All vote-by-mail ballots come with a postage-paid envelope, and as long as it's postmarked by Election Day on September 14th, your ballot may be cast at no cost without a stamp. Whether you return your ballot in the mail, at a drop box, or at a voting center, voting is safe and voting is secure. Last year, despite the devastating impacts of a global pandemic, a record number of Californians, approximately 17.8 million, almost 18 million, were able to safely and securely vote during the 2020 general election. At both the California Department of Justice and Secretary of State's office, we remain committed to ensuring that all elections in the state are safe, are fair, and are accessible to every voter. That means teaming up, working with local election officials, issuing guidance to law enforcement, and most importantly, it's about helping voters make their voices heard. On Election Day, the California Department of Justice is on call to provide assistance to the Secretary of State's office in enforcing California's election laws where needed through a team of attorneys and administrative staff located across the state. However, one of the first lines of defense on Election Day is you. California's voters should know their rights. It's an essential part of helping keep our elections safe and secure. And the California Voter Bill of Rights ensures you have the following rights: the right to vote if you are a registered voter, the right to vote if you are a registered voter, even if your name is not on the list, the right to vote if you are still in line when the polls close, the right to cast a secret ballot, the right to get a new ballot if you've made a mistake, the right to get help casting your ballot, the right to drop off your completed vote-by-mail ballot at any polling place, the right to get election materials in a language other than English, the right to ask questions to election officials about election procedures, and the right to report any illegal or fraudulent election activity. If you believe you have been denied any of these rights or you are aware of any election fraud or misconduct, please let us know. Just like when you're at the airport, if you're at the voting booth and see something that isn't right, please say something. Call the Secretary of State's confidential toll-free voter hotline at 800-345-VOTE, which is 8683. Before I hand it over to our amazing Secretary of State, let me say that it's up to each and every one of us to turn out and make our voices heard on September 14th. What makes this nation great is that we don't have rulers, we don't have dictators. In the United States of America, we're governed by the people, by you. With the power of self-governance also comes the responsibility to use your vote. No matter your political party or who you vote for, at the California Department of Justice, we stand ready to do our part to continue to protect your right to vote in our state. As we do our job, we need you to do yours. So exercise your right to vote. Now's the time to make your voice heard. And with that, let me thank you. And I'd now like to introduce the incredible Secretary of State for the state of California, my friend and my colleague, Dr. Shirley Weber.
I want to thank our Attorney General, Rob Bonta. I'm honored to have served with him in the Assembly. We came in together and we actually got appointed to these positions just a month or two apart. And so it's been a great opportunity to work with him and to know what he stands for and the values that he has. You know, I'm honored to serve as your Secretary of State, representing some 40 million voters, individuals in California. And I always say it's very ironic to have been the daughter of a sharecropper who was denied the opportunity to vote, who now has the responsibility of ensuring the vote for Californians, the largest voting population in the nation. It seems strange that we would have a voting Bill of Rights, you know, that this nation is founded upon the principles of voting. No taxation without representation was really about people being able to choose and participate in selecting their representatives. That's the foundation of this nation. And so why, you know, one would wonder, just that alone, as well as all of our other laws that are out there that would say that all Californians, all individuals who are citizens of California have a right to vote. And yet we find not only across the nation, but the history of this nation has often been trying to find barriers, putting things up to prevent people from voting. And that's why our Attorney General read to you or gave to you our voters' Bill of Rights, the 10 rights that you have to basically the right. You have a right to vote in California. California has made it possible so that every citizen who is walking the streets of California, who's a resident in California, really has the right to vote, because we don't have these laws that keep people who are on parole or probation or who've been a felon from voting. We are saying to everyone has a right to vote, other than those who are currently residents or currently basically incarcerated in federal and state prison. But otherwise, every Californian has a right to vote, and every Californian should vote. We have a very important election coming up on September the 14th, the recall election, and we're working very hard to make sure that every person believes that he has a right to express their opinion. It's a simple ballot. It's a ballot with 2 questions on it, really. Do you or do you not want to recall the governor? Simple yes or no. And the second question is, if for some reason you want he is recalled, who would you want as his replacement? And that's a simple answer that's there. So you vote 2 things on the ballot. We want to make sure every Californian votes, because this is an important decision, like every decision that we make in an election, and every person counts. And the last thing we want to hear on September 15th is that someone forgot to go to the polls, forgot to vote, and now they're not happy with the results. We should all want to make sure that our voices are heard. We have made it possible for everyone to vote. You're going to get a ballot, vote by mail ballot. California is doing that for every registered voter in California. You have until August the 30th to register to vote in California. And interestingly enough, we also have registration for voting on that day of the election. You would get a provisional ballot, and you can register to vote actually on September 14th. So you used to have an opportunity always to express yourself in California, and we want to encourage you to do that. We broke a record. We had record numbers last time in terms of voting. Over 80% of Californians who are registered to vote voted. We've had an increase in those who have now registered to vote. So we have a large number of Californians who are eligible, who are actually registered to vote. We want to do better than 80%. We want to basically hit 90, if not 100% of all Californians going to the polls or turning in their mail-in ballots. You'll also have an opportunity to go to vote early. You will also have an opportunity to use our ballot boxes to vote. So that what you did in November, you'll have the same opportunity this time in September 14th. So I want to encourage you all to realize that we have the right to vote in California, and we work hard to ensure that I'm grateful that the Attorney General and his staff have decided that this too is an extremely important issue, as they always have, and that they are prepared to enforce our Voting Rights Act. That anyone feels they've been violated need to call my office or his office and make sure that we know that we will not tolerate anyone who stands in the way of any Californian, one person or 100 people, and their right to vote. It is just that sacred. Our families knew that when they fought for the right to vote, and we plan to make sure that we ensure every Californian. So once again, I want to encourage you to recognize we're in the midst of it. You'll be getting something in the mail. Some of you have already gotten some informational documents in the mail about voting. Your ballots will be coming soon. As soon as you get them, you're able to turn them in. No stamp is required. You can take them to the register of voters. You can take them to your ballot box places, or you can turn them in the day of the election on September 14th. But in any event, please vote. We're making it possible for everyone to do that. And it's the sacred element of this democracy that every Californian votes for this important election and every election. Thank you so very much. And I'm grateful to join my AG, who's here, who's also ensuring California has the kind of democracy that we all respect and desire. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now open it up to questions. If you would like to ask a question, click on the raise hand icon to the right of your screen. You will then receive an invite to interact live. You must click OK to accept the invite. Once you accept the invite, you will then be moved into the queue. Please wait to speak until I invite you to state your question. We will then unmute your mic. Please state your outlet before you ask your question, and be advised that there is a 15-second delay between presenters and the audience. You may also ask a question by using our chat feature or emailing our press office. We'll now open it up to questions. Once again, if you would like to ask a question, please click on your raised hand icon to the right of your screen. You will then receive an invite to interact live. Click OK to accept that invite, and then you'll be moved into the queue. And our first question comes from Jeremy. Jeremy, you are now unmuted.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Dr. Weber and Attorney General Bonta, thanks for talking to us today. So I know neither of you has advocated for any particular outcome in this election, but I'm wondering if you have any concerns about the appropriateness of this event, given that Attorney General Bonta is very much on record supporting Governor Newsom's recall, and that there are a lot of concerns about enough Democrats turning out. This has a bit of a feel of looking to boost turnout, which is a big problem for the governor.
So what is your question?
Whether we have any concerns about this event we're in today appearing to be inappropriate because there's an element of seemingly advancing a partisan cause here, despite not advocating for a particular outcome in this election.
I'm happy to take that on, that question. Thank you for the question. And this is obviously a non-partisan event. We're talking about the right to vote. Every Californian has that right to vote. We're not talking about any candidate or any way of voting. That's every person's sacred right. We're talking about the fundamental, foundational right to vote on which our democracy is based. And as the California Attorney General, as the Chief Law Officer, my job is to implement the law, enforce the law, remind people of the laws and their rights. And that's what today is about. So including the Bill of Rights and all of the ways that people may exercise their right to vote and make their voice heard if they wish.
We have a unique responsibility, I think, to make sure that this election, as all elections, are fair and impartial, regardless of what our own personal views may be. And I think if you look at, particularly in my case, where we're dealing with directly with the administration of the election itself, and the 58 counties and the various registrar of voters whose political affiliation, I'm not that familiar with all of those affiliations. Each one has a responsibility to administer this election, to make sure that we get all the information out in every nook and cranny of California, so that everyone is empowered, not just those who might have resources and have access to it, but to every place that's possible. And I have not turned down any invitation to come to any place to say, would you come and explain to us about this? And I've been on a number of forums where we have the media present, and lots of media that's there. And I don't know whether they're Democrats or Republican, basically sharing with them what the process is about, how people are voting, how many questions are on the ballot, so forth and so on. So I think in that way, we all have our own political issues, but I think we've seen across the country that oftentimes secretaries of state are put in positions that are actually opposed to the person, to their own party. I've had to make decisions against the governor with regards to filing papers and so forth and so on, because I have to fairly administer the election. What my personal views may be concerning recalls and all those kinds of things, we've laid those aside and decided that my job is to administer a fair and transparent election, and we've done that. And this is not the only venue that I'm on with regards to making people understand how important voting is and what we need to do in order to turn out every person to vote, regardless of their political party.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Kathleen. Kathleen, you are now unmuted.
Hi, I actually had Kathleen Ernane with the AP. I had a similar question to Jeremy, which I think has been answered, and that's sort of what is the line between promoting voter turnout in a nonpartisan way, and promoting a voter turnout when we all know that higher voter turnout likely means more Democrats will vote, which will boost the governor. So I do think you answered that, but if there's anything else that you want to add, please go ahead.
I would always, and here I go again, I would always ask the question, what is the alternative to it? To suppress the voting because you think there may be more Democrats registered in California than others? That in itself would be against everything that I believe in terms of, am I going to suppress a vote because you want a different result, or are you going to do something to enhance a vote in order to get the results? Folks will vote the way they're going to vote, but it is extremely important that we make sure that every person has the information that's accurate information that will hopefully assist them in making the decision they're going to make, and hopefully will drive them to the polls to vote, every person. And the outcome will be the outcome. And I'd rather see that. Like I say, my goal is 100% voting. And why? Because I think everyone has a voice that needs to be heard. And that then makes the democracy stronger when people know that they are participating in a process that works. Having been a kid of a sharecropper, I know what it's like when you're denied the right to vote. I know what it did to my family. But in addition to that, I also know what happens when you don't feel you had anything to vote for. And either way, it has a devastating effect upon people who don't believe that their vote counts, that it matters, that people care. And we want to make sure that every California knows that. And I believe the 80% that turned out, the over 80% that turned out last year was because people felt not just so much the negative that they saw, but they saw the opportunity to vote and the fact that California wanted them to vote because why? We made it convenient. We made it so that people could register to vote in different ways. We made it possible that they could vote in different ways and different times. We took away people's excuses. And in the past, when I've tried to turn people out to vote, I've heard the excuse, well, I can't take off from work. I got to go to work that day. I'm not sure. Oh, I forgot. This happened, that happened. This time, we took away every excuse. And I think that is what my job is to continue to be, to really remove the excuses and the barriers so that we can move toward a position where every Californian knows and believes that their vote will count, that we want them to vote, and that we respect the outcome of their vote. And that's what's important.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and we'll also just add, this is about making sure that the constitutional and legal right to vote for the people of California is known, that right is not being infringed, that all of the components and dimensions of that right, as expanded upon and expounded upon by the law of California, including in the Voter Bill of Rights, is understood, so that individuals know what their rights are, how that right to vote can be exercised. And making sure that folks use that voice, because one's vote is one's voice, and how we create and establish our democracy, and how one uses it is entirely up to them. But for them to be ensured that right, for it to be protected, for the law to be enforced, and for individuals to know the different components of what their right means is really important and what brings us together today.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Julia. Julia, you are now unmuted.
Okay, and I'm sure you can hear me correct. Julia Dudley Najib, on Me News, Central Valley. And my question is essentially around the question dealing with the Democrat, the label of that not being on the governor's name. How significant is that, at least from a media perspective, for us to pay attention to that versus possibly paying attention to the 46 candidates and their background and experience, just in your directive? Again, it's about the affiliation of Democrat being behind the governor's name, not on the ballot specifically, is what my question is relative to, versus giving people information on the 46 other candidates that are listed there. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for that question, because when we were not able to allow the governor to put his affiliation on the ballot, it was really a direct result of the law that exists concerning the opposition statement And that was very, very specific. It said if it's not there at the time it's filed, it cannot be, that I cannot add it to it. I cannot add it to that statement. And that was clear. That was very clear. And would I have preferred that it be there for purposes of helping people understand and clarity? That may have been true, but I didn't have the authority to change the law to basically allow this to happen, especially when the law was not a maybe or could be, but really was very specific and said it could not be added afterwards. And the issue was really an issue that was, 16 months old. It had happened in February of 2020, and I was addressing it in 2021. So this was an issue that obviously was upheld by the courts because the law was so very, very specific. Now, and this is why I say there are many things about the recall issues and the way it's done and what we are limited in our ability to do that really obviously we have to have conversation about. But clearly that in that case, we didn't have the authority to do it. Most people in California know that Governor Newsom is a Democrat. Okay, so that it's not like it was a secret issue, but it would help to clarify things for individuals. But we didn't have the authority to add that to the ballot, to the statement, the opposition statement that he had put together in February of 2020. Now, is it important to focus on the 47 people? Sure, and it was not us who focused upon the designation. The request came to us, and we could not make the request, and therefore they filed suit, and we had to go to court to basically explain why we could not do it. It was up to the judge to decide if he wanted to do it, and he chose not to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Our next question comes from KERO, who asks what the California Department of Justice's legal team are doing to ensure the security of mail-in ballots.
Thank you. Well, we have a team of attorneys and a broader team as well that are involved in enforcing all aspects of California law, including the right to vote, and how to make sure that it's being done with integrity according to the law, without any fraud, and that every vote that is cast is counted. So our team is working throughout the state with our partners, including, of course, the Secretary of State and the different county registrars of voters, and ensuring that if there are any improprieties, that we are made aware of them and taking action as necessary, all in defense of that fundamental right to vote for all Californians. So we have a team ready. We're working and on standby to hear about any concerns or challenges as well, and prepared to do what is necessary to enforce the law and make sure that that fundamental right to vote for all Californians is protected in a safe and secure election.
Our next question comes from Sandy. Sandy, you are now unmuted.
Yes, the question I have concerns how the Constitution provides for a candidate to win by fewer votes than the number of voters who want the recall to be defeated. It feels like it's very hard to understand how that voting process came to be. Is it part of the Constitution?
You're not the only person who has concerns about the process with respect to recalls. I know that there's been, opining and concerns raised. There's also been, an op-ed from a very esteemed, legal leader in our state, talking about his belief that it might even be unconstitutional. So, we're aware of that argument and some of the other concerns, and we'll be making sure that we stay abreast of this issue and monitoring it. But the way we have the way that the election is set up, is the way that we think is legally compliant and constitutional. And but we are aware of some of the concerns that have been raised, similar to yours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Jaya, who asks, how would both you, Secretary Weber, and AG Bonta describe a successful election, in this case, in the recall election?
Well, I think any successful election, hopefully, is similar to the one that we had in November, not necessarily focusing on the outcome, who won and who lost. That's up to each one of us will have our own individual opinion of whether or not it was successful or did we accomplish our goal. But the question is, did we have a turnout that was representative of California? Did we find ourselves with a very low turnout and only those who quote normally vote, or did everyone vote as we saw in November? So did we have a great turnout? Do we have a turnout that really reflects the diversity of California and the politics of California? Did people feel that the election was easy to do, that the voting was easy, that it was unobscured, that we didn't have a lot of activity and intimidation against people voting? Those kinds of things is what I look at as a successful election. That our machines worked, that all the things that could go wrong didn't go wrong, and that Californians felt they enjoyed the voting process. And when I talk with individuals after the November election, after I was appointed, and talked with the registrar of voters, each one of them said almost the same thing. It was a great election because it was the things worked. People didn't complain. They had many opportunities to vote, and they took advantage of it. Things went smoothly. Even the complaints that came in were unfounded complaints, a few complaints that came in, and there was no evidence of fraud or misuse of the process. And so that's what I consider a successful election. And that's one of the reasons why we're working very hard to make sure people understand what their choices are, what their options are with regards to this election, that everyone gets a ballot, that we try to open up as many polling places as possible, voting centers with longer hours and more than one day to vote, so that it makes it an easy and fair process for everyone. And I think that is what I would consider a successful election. The outcome will be the outcome. And I can't manipulate that. I can't determine that. But I don't want people to feel like they didn't know what they were doing, that they were confused, and that they didn't have an opportunity to get to basically cast their ballot. Then I would consider it not very successful. But if people have a chance to express themselves and they do it, then I consider that an extremely successful election.
I'll agree with that. Success is of an election is going to be an election that is safe, that is secure, that is free of any fraud or misconduct or illegal activity, that allows for every voter who wishes to vote to be able to make their voice heard through their vote, for there to be no hiccups administratively in the voting process or on election day, and that those barriers that could get between a person and their fundamental right to vote are not created in any way that is not compliant with the law or unnecessary. So I hope that everyone will experience the ability to raise their voice through their vote and do so in a way free of any fraud or illegal activity, and that the election is full of integrity and safety and security.
Thank you. And our next question comes from Antonio, who asks Dr. Weber if you know the dollar amount for this recall thus far.
We don't have the exact amount, but I do know that it's about $269 million. It may go as high as $300 million. The initial numbers that came in because of people thought it would be a special election where they could combine precincts, because they thought it was thinking in special election, you have a smaller turnout like we just had in the recent election, you 15-20%. We realized in a recall, the last one we did was 70% people turned out to vote. The assumption is that would be 70 to 80 or 90% of the voters voting. So therefore, we require more polling places. So it could go as high as $300 million or above, but we know it is going to be at least $269 or $279 million for this election. And that money comes out of the general fund. It's not going to be put on the backs of the counties.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Kathleen. Kathleen, you are now unmuted.
Hi, Kathleen with the AP again. I had one more question for the Attorney General. In response to the question about concerns about the constitutionality of the recall, you said that you'll be monitoring it and staying abreast of the issue. What exactly does that mean? And if someone were to challenge the constitutionality of the recall process, would you, as the AG, defend the law as it exists today?
Well, let me be more precise. Thank you for the follow-up question. We're aware of Berkeley Law Dean Erwin Chemerinsky, who's a very well-regarded legal mind and professor and attorney. He wrote an op-ed arguing that the recall process is unconstitutional. There's also a lawsuit challenging the recall on similar grounds. We're aware of that, and we'll be coordinating with the Secretary of State's office to determine next steps. And so, that's where we are in that process. And the main point today, though, is that voters should be aware of their existing rights under California law, and if they wish to vote, make a plan to cast their ballot. So, I guess to your specific point about monitoring, we're aware of the complaint and the lawsuit, and we'll be coordinating with the Secretary of State's office to determine next steps.
Thank you. We have time for one final question, and that question will come from Julia. Julia, you are now unmuted.
Thank you. I just had some questions in regards to the COVID-19. We are looking at, of course, the Delta variant and other variants that are popping up, and California is usually pretty well on top of things when it comes to that. Just want to know if there's any protocols that we should know about to let the public be aware of if they are going in person to vote, or any COVID-19 vaccination protocols that we should be aware of if they're going into their location, whether to be to drop off their ballot and so forth. Thank you.
We will have the same protocol that we had in the November election in terms of the voting centers, people dropping off ballots, those kinds of things. Our folks will be trained in cleaning the facility and making sure that all the things that are there that are touched or whatever are clean. And that's one of the reasons why the legislature decided to do not only to fund the election, but for some consistency, but also to make sure that everyone got a ballot at home and those kinds of things. Those are special provisions that we did based on from the November election that we decided to carry over into this special election. So that's why all the things that we did in November will also be done during this coming election in September.
Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Weber or AG, do you have any closing remarks?
I just want to thank the AG for having me on with him today and to being a part of this call and having him as a partner on this whole issue of making sure that every Californian has the right to vote. And we want to encourage all the media outlets to make sure that they share with people the schedules that are there. There are a number of things on my website that helps individuals that they can go to the website to get information. And we do have hotlines to clarify any misinformation that's there. So we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to turn out to vote, and that September 14th is a successful election because everyone had a right to exercise their right to vote. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. I also appreciate the opportunity to continue to partner with Dr. Shirley Weber, our Secretary of State, just as we did in the legislature, and thankful for the opportunity to remind folks of the law and the constitutional rights that they have to vote and the different aspects and dimensions of that right. So please be aware of all of your various rights as they apply to the upcoming recall election and your right to vote. And if there's any concerns, please reach out to the Secretary of State's office or to mine. It's our job to make sure that your rights are honored and protected. And I hope that you will all raise your voices through your vote in the way that you see fit to participate in our democracy.
The theme of this episode is the novel coronavirus